So, Michael, we're talking about this massive breach, or I should say significant breach of a massive amount of data. And this data is, of course, all of the most important, I guess, documents, accounts, signifiers, almost passkeys that people have if they have any type of financial life whatsoever, that Equifax has perhaps unreasonably left, didn't do their job in protecting this information from hackers. What do we know about how much information was accessed, how it was accessed, et cetera?
So we were preliminary, I think. And I think you're going to see that this information might change over time. But right now we know the number's something like, I believe, 146 million people could be affected by this. When you think about that, I mean, that's an astronomical number. If you just think about the number of Americans here at something less than 350 million or something like that. So you're talking about almost half of the United States of America could have had their data compromised in one manner or another. Now, there's varying degrees of that. As you pointed out, there's different types of information that was released. And it's not for everyone from the data we've been given, from the information we've been given. It's not necessarily that every credit card number, every bank number for every one of those 146 million people has been compromised. Certainly now we believe that several hundred thousand people's credit card type of information, that type of sensitive information has been compromised. And there's millions of people that it might be those sensitive user PIN type of information or the social security number, that type of data. But it's not necessarily uniform across the board. But again, right now, you're just dealing with what Equifax is choosing to tell you. So what we've been given, or what we've been told so far, is essentially what they've released, which they didn't choose to release for about 45 days. They've known this since July.
And we should say they waited 45 days to release that information. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but a couple of their top managers, I think 3 of them, sold off what to me is a significant amount of stock. Maybe it's not to them, but they were able to put some cash in their pockets. Who knows, right? I mean, that's a coincidence. I hope that's being investigated. But, I mean, is there an agency that, because we're talking about a government-issued document like the Social Security card, where I know that state laws have restrictions on how private entities can use this information. I imagine there are federal statutes or at least regulations, but certainly there's a presumption that you would treat this information not casually. Is there a government agency now that's basically saying, all right, look, you guys are on a clock. You need to get this information out? Is there anybody who's out there who is protecting the interests of consumers who may be looking at a nightmare scenario of identity theft?
Sam, I think that might be sort of one of the problems, is that you're going to find this type of monitoring being done by a lot of different people, and I think it's pretty fragmented. There's different agencies that are going to be responsible for different areas, and I don't think that there's really one agency with overarching power that controls this for all types of businesses or all types of companies. And I think you're even going to see, specifically when you get into the credit reporting companies, you're going to see that even that's a bit fragmented into who's looking at this. Might some of that be with things like the FBI? Sure, some of it will. The criminal component, some of that might be. Even what we're talking about right now, you're talking about the insider trading, which those allegations are just again, I color me skeptical when I say that. I think, it's a little bit of a coincidence that you have 3 executives in the weeks after they discover this, that they decide to sell off millions of dollars of their stock options. But I mean, that's pulling in the SEC, I'm sure, and I'm sure that's pulling in the Department of Justice as well. And then there's other smaller agencies. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau will be one of them, which may even delve into some of this data security issues. And so I think part of the problem is, in and of itself, it is fragmented. And I think a lot of this, the final say with what the companies are doing, with what Equifax is doing, with what the other companies similar to them are doing, is that I think they have the final say into how they're doing it. And I'm not sure that there is a lot of specific direction on the front end. A lot of it's coming later on. We're coming back trying to clean up the mess after it's happened.
Okay, so they're basically handling it's almost like a voluntary recall, and they've asked people to go to a site where you can check and see if your stuff has been compromised. I've been there. I haven't been there in quite as recent. I was there earlier in the week, and it said maybe, and then it said you can sign up for 1 year of protection. And then they start charging me money. I mean, and initially there was some type of arbitration clause saying I could lose my ability to sue them. What's the deal now?
Right, and that's where it's definitely been in flux, and there's a sort of a positive development, if you will, just starting with the last thing you mentioned, which is the arbitration agreement, because that's something that was on there, and I was saying, well, hey, we want to make things right, but by the way, let's slip in this little term here where it says that, hey, if we get, sued later on, if you have more damages or if some of your financial information gets compromised, tough luck. You give up the right to do that, and you've got to sue us in private arbitration.
Why wouldn't these hackers just hold on to the information in a year when they know a certain percentage of people's, are going to let this free protection lapse when they have to start paying for it?
Sure. I mean, I think that's one practical consideration, and it's once your information's out there, it's out there. That's the thing, is that even if they try to use it now, could they try to use it again in the future? And even if it's maybe one piece of your information, the damage has sort of been done once the information has been compromised.
So, all right. So what should people do? What should people do now?
Well, people should. There are several cases that have actually been filed so far, and they've been filed as class actions. I think people should take their own action, see if you have been affected, has your information been compromised, follow credit monitoring services if you can. And what Equifax has said, which I would, again, color me a little bit skeptical, is that, well, we're not going to enforce the arbitration agreements. And even though fundamentally, as an introduction, when people who did sign up with Equifax, you signed an agreement with them, they already had an arbitration agreement. So there's already an arbitration agreement pulling things away from the court system, which would really be the best method for handling this data breach once it's happened. And then it's sort of insult to injury. Equifax was saying, well, we're going to give you some credit monitoring. We're going to give you a year of it for free, and then you're going to start paying for it after the first year. So maybe we'll, make our money back after that. But we're going to give that to you, but you're going to waive all of your rights on the front end. So that's sort of insult to injury situation. They're saying now that they're not going to enforce that.
So should I sign up for that thing? I mean, if I want to keep my rights, I want to reserve my rights, should I sign up for that thing and trust them? Can the argument that they're telling this publicly that we don't have to pay attention to it, will that hold water? We just got about 30 seconds left.
Sure. So I think probably yes, is that you'd still be okay signing up for it because they've made a public proclamation on which you should be able to rely, which is we're not going to enforce this arbitration agreement against you. The downside is most arbitration agreements are enforced, regardless of whether they're on the back page of something. So I'm a little wary of that, but I think based on what they're saying, they'd have a hard time reneging.
All right. And then people can look around. A lot of people are suggesting freezing your credit. It's a little bit inconvenient, but it's a lot less inconvenient than having your identity stolen, that's for sure. Michael, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam.
All right, folks, going to take a quick break. Be right back. Sam Seder, Ring of Fire Radio.